Okay, so I think we will get started with our first talk, and the first person up is going to be Erin. So, Erin, I'll do a little introduction, and then you can take over. So, Erin Staples is a developer advocate, community human, tech educator, and comedian living in Brooklyn, New York. She's currently a developer experience engineer at Launch Darkly, working to facilitate wins through education, content, and connection. Erin is the co-host of the DevRelish podcast, a bar trivia league enthusiast, performs and produces comedy in New York City. She's a prolific broadcaster and has appeared in publications like New York Times and her mother's dog's Instagram account. Much more important, that one. I smell a Pulitzer on the way. Most importantly, she believes in the power of being unabashedly into things and works to help friends, strangers, colleagues, community builders, students, and whoever else might cross her path to find their thing. Erin's moonshot, as Sinead has just discovered this week, is to find a way to average the weather and temperatures between sweltering Brazil and freezing Brooklyn. Erin, please take it away.
All right, and thank you for all of that. And yes, my mom's dog's Instagram account is very, very proud. It's like my mom's dog's Instagram, and then she tells me to quit having a potty mouth on the internet sometimes and don't talk to strangers online. So, and then I joke and I'm like, Mom, I actually made a full-time career of talking to people that you would identify as a stranger on the internet. But for a little bit about today's topic, I'm going to basically walk through the things that I believe made me successful in landing a job in this current DevRel job market. So because of various things, positioning myself here as kind of a expert, I have been laid off in 2020. I was laid off in 2022 and laid off in 2023. So that's 3 layoffs and 3 downturns, none of which were performance-based, none of which were anything other than economic circumstances. And so I got to experience that not 1, not 2, but 3 times. So I don't want to say I'm a bit of an expert at it, but bit of an expert. And if I had to give this talk an alternate title, it would definitely be, how did I navigate this bullshit? Because let's be honest, finding a job and getting a job absolutely overall sucks. But before we begin, aside from that really great introduction from Richard, I am a developer experience engineer at Launch Darkly. That's where I've landed. I am a comedian, a producer, an event host. I do host the DevRelish podcast. I'm a rescue dog mom, so I believe it or not, do not have any dog pictures in this deck, but in many of my other presentations, I do have dog pictures. And all of that, before we kind of get going, is I love people. I love people being into things. So keep the chat going. If you have any questions, don't be a stranger. If you're like, oh my goodness, I have something and I want to save it till afterwards because I don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, that's okay too. But before we begin, I kind of just want to quickly run through a quick roadmap of the adventure. So first off, what is the current state of the DevRel job market? What is DevRel anyway? How do you position yourself in the market? What do you do about that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough or you shouldn't be? And then how do you get the word out that, hey, I'm looking for a job. I need a job. I'm going on an adventure. And then if we have any questions at the end, Pachi and I can go through the fun questions in the panel time. But one more thing I want to, before we continue this, I know and I want to acknowledge a couple of things. One, I'm based in the States and I do have a higher education degree. So I do have a master's and an undergrad. That does want to acknowledge the privilege that I have as an American that has been very fortunate to have scholarship cover a lot of my education. I also am a white woman in an English speaking world. I want to really acknowledge that because I cannot represent or be able to appropriately acknowledge the kind of the privilege that I have. And I do know that just existence does come with privilege. And so we got to say it. We got to be honest. And that does make it harder for some people to find jobs in this current market. So doesn't mean there's no hope. And it doesn't mean that these tips don't apply to you. Just wanting to acknowledge that privilege. So what is the current state of the DevRel market? And I'm curious if you want to type it in the chat. How do you feel the DevRel market is performing? Do you think we're on a high, a low, better than it was last year, worse than it was last year? I have no idea. And I say this here in a time of seasonality. So if you're living in the States, that means that most of your colleagues have gone on holiday break, and around the world, we're at that time of the year where it's like, kick it to the next year, kicking it on to January. We'll deal with it regionally. Low and very localized. Yeah, there's a lot of it stuff out there. So for context, I have been in the DevRel space for a while. But people are trying to understand the role better. I think that's a really great way of putting it. I worked at a lot of community-based company. I worked at Orbit. I have done talks sponsored by Common Room. I've been paid for by Content by Comsler, which are 3 large companies that are in their space. I guess they're not all large anymore. I wrote this blog post in February of this year. It kind of popped off a little bit bigger than I thought it did. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is this community industry, this DevRel industry, this acknowledgement and this influx of talent. And I feel like everybody and their cousin was hiring for a community or DevRel job in 2020. And that's just not the case right now. Yeah, and I think Jason's putting it, feels it's stabilized, but everybody's kind of just waiting to January. And yeah, that's a very real thing. It's changed a lot. And I have links to all of these presentations and all these references in another one. And so Andy adds, I'm not saying it in a good or a strong place. Which, yeah, it's still like for me, it still feels like an up and coming market. Like that's a job title. When I got my first community title, I actually had no idea what online community or open source communities did. I was a product manager that was told, you are now head of open source community. So I relate, did not know this was what I was going to be when I grew up. Was never on any career talks. But one of the things that we're seeing is for like a better thing, and I think, what PJ alluded to in the chat is we're actually changing a lot what these jobs meant. So we are having more specific titles. At LaunchDarkly, we're now developer experience engineers versus DevRel. I saw job titles change recently a lot. Sometimes it was a product manager that was in charge of communities. Sometimes it was charge of feedback. One thing that I have seen, though, is, do you remember the days of we just hiring someone that had a really strong social media following and hope that it led to actual results? Social media followings are great. But we're now starting to actually see replacing this idea of influencers with people with influence who have done the work. And I say that because they're 2 different things. And I say that as someone who has been paid for sponsored content as well. The current state of the market, I personally believe, and in my experience, is a lot on changing how we're approaching and changing how we're thinking about this rules. And we're in this like very shaky world. And like, yes, kind of like what Pachi said is like, we are getting more localized. Like, unfortunately, and I think this is not just in DevRel, but in any role, for whatever reason, we decided that we're only hiring in the US now, which is quite a shame because there's talented people around the globe. But one caveat I want to add, I love this webcomic from Comic of the Apes. Because, reading this out loud, I love reading open your minds, new ideas. I read the internet. Please stop on where you're getting your information. Surveys are biased. Are they surveying? I went to a meetup earlier this year, and I actually spoke up because this meetup was a meetup and it had a lot of people in developer experience and docs and like community facing roles. And I remember sitting in this room going, and I had just signed my offer letter, and I had gotten a raise over this last job, and I was like, hell yeah, I got a raise. I'm feeling really great about myself of getting this job and getting this raise. And I went into this meetup and I instantly felt like crap because everybody was like, you should have asked for more money. You should have done this. Like, you should have done all of this stuff. And I'm like, am I getting underpaid for the market? Am I getting shortchanged? Did I not find a job that fits me? But the room was very much making me feel like I should have done more. And I was sitting in this call and I looked around the room and I went, great, these are all people with different levels of experience at companies of different sizes doing different things than me. And so the information that I'm getting is not accurate to what I should be getting. So again, check where you're getting your information. Is the company trying to sell you something, putting out the information, or is this actual vetted information? And what is the end goal of someone sharing these things? So very important. All right. What are these roles anyways? Okay, so if someone had to sum up DevRel or dev advocacy, dev experience in a sentence, I'd like us to kind of try and think, how does that fit in a job post? We're going to think about it because in my time looking for a job, I applied for product manager roles, open source facilitator roles, which facilitator was an interesting one, technical educator. I am technically by the Department of NYU, I was a instructor, faculty instructor, but not quite faculty full-time. And I can't be a professor because I don't have a PhD. So these roles are all over the place. And to quote one Jim Carrey, some of these titles are all made up and the points don't matter. At the end of the day, sometimes we just don't quite understand what is going on or what we need to be doing. As kind of we mentioned earlier on, many people, I didn't even know that DevRel was a career. I didn't know was DevRel in a career. I fell into it. I like to reference to, we have a fun video to share. This is my favorite clip when someone asks what I do for a job to send out. It's from the TV show Mythic Quest. I promise there's no spoilers in this, but we're going to take a break from me talking and listen to this. This is very much someone focused on the community side. To context this clip, this is a clip from Mythic Quest. It's on Apple TV. Very funny if you want to watch it. It's like Silicon Valley, but if it was Silicon Valley was a game development studio. And they are asking Sue, the community manager, who is on a career day.
So what do you do here? I'm the community manager.
Yes, Sue has a very interesting job. She interacts with our players online to find out the things that they like and don't like about Mythic Quest.
Yeah, and darn if they don't like a lot of things. Sometimes I wonder why they play.
What's a typical day like for you?
How do I put this? Okay, girls, you know how when you just get so mad and frustrated that you just want to scream into a pillow? When you're mad at your mom? Well, I guess you could say for our player community.
Oh no, and we have an audio issue here. Let's see if I can crank this audio bad boy up. Bum, bum, bum. I'm going to do one of those. Oh, audio good for me? All right. Oh, weird. So sorry, y'all. We'll just fast forward it back again. Sorry, I interrupted that.
Want to scream into a pillow, when you're mad at your mom? Well, I guess you could say for our player community, I'm kind of like their mom. And the pillow.
You're super nice. Oh. I want to do what you do.
No. 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 No.
And that's Sue.
So to kind of sum things up, recap that, she explains she's the community manager, people who don't like, she's kind of like the community player's mom. When users don't like her game, they scream at her. And when she has to go figure out what to do with it. And sometimes she screams into the pillow. She's just getting yelled at by the staff and getting yelled at by the public. And if you've ever been a developer advocate for a problem that you can't solve, or that you have to break bad news to a community and you don't want to, you've probably been in Sue's shoes. And so this one hits always a little too hard for me, and is also the clip I send to anybody when they ask what I do, but add on a tack of adding the actual value in the building sometimes. And that depends on role to role. So the chart I like to use, I'm kind of a visual all over the place thinker. This is from Mary Thingvall. I did not come up with this. It's linked in this presentation, and you guys can all grab the link at the end. I love this triangle. So when I quantify what I do, this is the triangle I reference. And right now in the job market, I'm going to put a secret here. A lot of companies don't actually know what they want or need. And that's something that's a little concerning. Because if you don't know what you want or need, how do you know how to be the person to be the best person for the job that you're trying to get? Which is a problem. We need to be good about that. We have this triangle of here, which is she describes it as awareness, enablement, and engagement. So there's a 3-tier approach: the community management, the developer advocacy, and the developer experience. And yes, those are 3 independent roles, but do not marry them exactly. Sometimes I have seen community management roles that actually are more developer experience. I've seen developer advocacy roles that look a lot like community management. Don't get married to the title. Instead, keep this in the back of your brain as like, what is the role going to be and what does the title have? And what title do I want in the long run? So I think for me, I very much started my route to this industry. I started very heavily on the community management side. I fell into this world, and I would very much describe to recruiters or people when I was interviewing, I'd be like, hey, I started here. Because they'd ask me, where are you strongest in your work? And I'd be like, well, I started here. I was running a beta user group for a e-commerce startup. And I was running a lot of the community events, the live streams. And then I slowly was remembering that, like, hey, I am technical. I do code, and started fixing some of the things and writing the documentation that I was working on. And then at my last role, I was doing a lot of documentation, tutorials, education, and moved more towards that developer experience. So right now in my career, I'd probably put myself smack dab in the middle. I'm not quite fully on the developer experience side. I'm doing a lot of community work. I have a Discord, I stream on Twitch, but I also do a lot of developer advocacy work. I've been a speaker, but most of my career has been at smaller early stage startups where I have had to do a lot of different things and wear many different hats. Like one thing I'm learning now in my current role, docs is a different team. So I don't really write docs. I give feedback to docs, but I don't personally write docs, which is a thing in itself. And that was a thing that I had to learn. And I'm learning now that I'm on a bigger team. So that's how I kind of think about these experiences and moving it forward. So this is a good framework. And remember, like, companies don't always know where they're at on that role. So now that I'm like looking for a role, and if you're looking for a role, you need to figure out, how do I position myself publicly in this triangle of where I'm at? So taking the time to make sure that you are aligned with the role that you want to be. And this is something I think made the biggest impact in actually me landing these roles. So I took a lot of time. And one of the biggest pieces of feedback I have gotten on my resume is, Erin, you're a little bit all over the place. You have held titles such as, I've been a minor league basketball mascot. I've been a bartender. I have been a teacher. I have been a junior art director was a title I held. I was a court reporter. I did user research and user feedback. I've gotten a lot of different stuff. Only in the last 5 years is when I've really found what I wanted to do. But I probably changed industries every year before then, or every year or two. And how do I sum that up in one persona? And so I actually had a really good friend of mine who is on the HR side of things help me out with this. And so she was like, who the heck are you and what do you love to do? If you could only pick 5 things, what would those 5 things be? And I know 5's a lot. Like some people are 3. They only want to do 3 things, but be specific, niche down. So for me, I love education. Like I'm an educator first. I have always loved education. I absolutely love creating educational content and tutorials. If you're going to be like, you can only create one type of content, I want to just create tutorials, education content, and learn how to do things all the time. I'm a seasoned public speaker. As they mentioned, I am a comedian. I feel very comfortable on a mic. I know how to handle a crowd. It doesn't faze me. 0, whatever, behind a screen. I'm a multimedia content creator. I have both a master's and an undergraduate degree in journalism. And I went to journalism school at the time that I graduated in the pivot to video. So we were all learning how to edit video and edit audio. Like opening up a video editor or streaming content does not faze me at all. I produce event. I host shows, 3 shows minimum a month in New York City. And guess what? It's a lot easier for people to come to a funded developer relations meetup than an introduction to stand-up comedy show. Yeah, believe it or not, people don't want to hear beginning comics all the time. And if I can wrangle people to beginning comic shows, it is way easier to get them to a meetup that I have funds and resources to. And then I describe myself as kind of a chaos full stack developer. And so I've been on every part of the development cycle, not intentionally. I just took different roles and they led me to learning skills across the entire full stack department. But I also know what I don't like. As in, I worked at a place that a lot of the people were learning Ruby, and I thought Ruby never stuck in my head. I can't write Ruby. It's hard. It hurts my brain. I know that's not my jam. But I would tell people I'm strongest in Python, and I feel very comfortable in Python. and databases is where I feel very comfortable in. And then I came through that through a product thinker. So I was a product manager before moving my thing to their Fords. And, to make a tight, quick tangent, wow, words today. I was a mascot very briefly. Basically, I was working at an agency. The mascot didn't show up. And I basically took the say yes and figure it out later perspective and volunteered to be the mascot at a game. So now it's a great talking point as how I've been that. But the next part is how do we take these 5 bullet points and actually put them into a nice little resume format? So this is an actual screenshot from my resume. Take all those things that you want to be known for and quantify it. So how did I do this? So in my last role, I worked on the Label Studio integrations library with over 15 partner integrations. So I quantified it. There was over 15 people I had to work with. I developed relationships. That little underline border thing is a link. I did events. So I drove one of the largest spikes in open source product adoption and later further product development from this thing. I wasn't just a one-off. It's a reoccurring trend. I knew how to take an event and make it expand the wealth of it from on. I went viral once on the internet. It was great and terrible. If you've ever gone viral, you know what I mean. But I took a one-off viral instance and made it a repeatable event with key partnerships and press relationships. So I know how to kind of quantify that. But anytime that you can answer the question, so what, do so. Tell your audience, so what? Why does that matter? Because guess what? The recruiter isn't going to get it unless you tell them and you make it explicit. Now, the question that I had to get over, and this took getting laid off not just once, not just twice, but 3 times in the times that is hard, is I would very quickly to discredit myself. I would be like, it's not that big. This is my first time doing that. I'm just starting to learn about, and I really started to discredit myself. And this took friends and colleagues and peers really jamming this one down my throat. If you're thinking that, I have a little bit of news for you. And it's news that sometimes is hard to swallow. If you aren't going to shout out your achievements from the rooftop, no one else is going to do it for you. So what if that's the first time you did it? You still did it. So what if you just learned it? You still wrote the damn code. If you can't shout out your achievements, no one else is going to do it for you. The other advice that I got is your inner critic will shut up when you do the work. If you don't feel confident talking about something, and this is something that my graduate advisor told us a lot, is if you don't feel confident about speaking about it, maybe you need to shut up and go do the work. Do the research, do the work. And at some point, we all have to recognize that we all don't feel confident at times. But it's going back and finding those resources to make sure that you fully understand the topic inside, outside, upside down, and do the work and get your hands dirty and actually building. Most importantly, and this is something I think is really important, believe in giving a damn about what you do. Someone posted, and I saw it on a thread, and it was in a conversation in a Discord that I'm in. And they were like, well, I don't like posting about my day job and my side hustle in the same thing. And my take is very much like, if you're working on it and you're not proud of it, probably go ask yourself why you're working on it in the first place. And I know that's a very privileged take to say, but do work that you're proud of. And that means either a higher quality of work or other things, and find something. There's all been that project that we've been assigned that we don't like. Find the one thing that you do like about it, or is it the relationships you're proud of fostering? Is it the, I didn't like the end result, or I didn't like the new whatever that we chose, but is it the relationship? Is it a process you built? Is it a thing? And then shout about that from the rooftops. You don't have to shout about the end product, but I'll always share my company things that I did that I'm proud of. Why? Because again, if I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. I have to be my own biggest cheerleader. We're coming up on the end here, so a couple of things. The actual search process. And again, I say this, I am a highly educated white female, cis presenting in America. So I did have some privilege help me out here. But the first thing is, no one is going to know if you're looking for work if you don't tell them. You got to put yourself out there. And I know that's the scariest thing to do. But there's a couple of things you can do in advance that make it a little less scarier, and it makes you feel like you have a couple cheerleaders in your back pocket. And I'm so thankful that I've done these the last 2 times. First off, make it easy for people to share and know what you're looking up to. So this is actually my for hire page. My resume is linked right at the top. It tells you who I am, what I'm looking for, what I'm not looking for, all in one place. It has my biggest achievements. It has my portfolio. It has what I'm super proud of. It has case studies. It has actual work samples you can go in and click on, but it's all in one page that I could send to a recruiter. Hi, I'm looking for a role. I'm just laid off. Here's some things that I did recently I'm really proud of. X, Y, Z. If you want to learn more about my qualifications and why I'm the best person for this job, and yes, say best person for this job, because you are, don't, and again, if you ain't cheerleading yourself, no one else is going to. Put that in the links, drop it, make it easy, and put this all in one section. Then, before you turn on that open for work banner and where you're working on your page, ask your friends for your recommendations. This is friends, peers, colleagues, that one contractor you talk to. This is an exact sample of I was laid off at 10 a.m. this morning. This is 6 p.m. that later on that day. This isn't a teammate. This is a contractor I worked with, and I just loved working with them. And they actually had a lot of clients that I really enjoyed. And so I put, hey, unfortunately, my time has come to an end. One of my highlights was working with you. Sometimes you can add in, I will most remember XYZ, this project we worked on together, this idea that we collaborated with, this concept. Remember how fun remind them of the highlights and put it front and center. And if you know them well enough, don't be afraid to ask, hey, my next role, I'm looking for an education. Do you mind adding 1 or 2 samples or sentences about education on this? And then even tell them, before I switch over that open for work banner, I would love to have a recommendation from you on this page. I did this the entire day after I was laid off. And I spent the day sending these messages frantically. By the end of the day, I had 6 to 9 people that I had worked with, collaborated with, partnered with, all at one point. So, and again, I'm a big believer, if you do the work and you're putting yourself out there, this will come. But again, I want to emphasize the importance of doing the work first. If you don't do the work, at the end of the day, we all have a job to do. You can't just make cool social media posts and be like the celebrity on Twitter, because I feel like that's what a lot of people think that DevRel is. You actually have to put your pens to paper and do the work. Also, I aspire to be you, Andy, when I grew up. So very good to hear, very flattering, and glad that it's been super helpful. And yes, make it easy for people. No one's going to do your work, but that's what I have for today. I'll send out this presentation and links as well, but don't be a stranger. All that good fun stuff. You can find me at all the places at erin.bio, and tells you a little bit more about myself. You can also find me at erinmikailstaples.com. And this is just some of the links and whatnot I use in this presentation. So feel free to take it. My for hire page is still on my website right now because I haven't updated it because I've been lazy. So go ahead, creep on it. My resume is on there. It's a full open book. Again, big believer in all of that fun stuff. But yeah, 'tis all for that.
Fabulous. Yeah, the grind is really true, isn't it? It's what you gotta do. I'd almost request, Erin, that you leave that for hire page up. You might want to put a notice saying I have a job, but as kind of a reference for others. It's a fantastic resource.
Yeah, let me grab. I actually have a link on.
Is that open source?
Yeah, I was gonna say I have a link of like how I made it, because I actually can't complain the original source for this. Actually, someone else did it, and I was like, wow, that's so brilliant. I stole it from them. So that is not my original brilliance, and the original ones that I did find are linked in that for hire page. So
awesome. Okay. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, discussion participant, Pachi Parra. Pachi is a co-founder of Feminist Tech, an online community of cis women, trans, and non-binary people in tech. She has experience as a developer advocate, tech community manager, and DevRel specialist. Her passions include communities, empowering women, anime, and her cats. I suspect the cats thing may have gotten her on tonight's panel, as Sinead will find any reason to bring people with cats onto the meetup, and there's lots of evidence of that.
I have 4 of them, so.
Indeed. We are very grateful to Pachi for joining us tonight to discuss job hunting as a DevRel. Is an experience she's currently going through. And we really appreciate her sharing her thoughts with us. So welcome, Pachi. And
Thank you.
let's open the discussion a little bit. Pachi, I guess I'll hand over to you maybe to make the first comments.
Yeah, so it's really great to see like Erin perspective. We're similar in very things. I love how she talk about privilege. It's just so important to acknowledge that. I'm also a cis-white woman. I usually live in the West until a year ago, almost 2 years ago, and it was funny back then that we were all seeing a lot more globalized. Now I moved back to Brazil, and it is people don't want to hire over the globe anymore. And I have been looking for a job since June. The first 3 months were low key. I knew I was going to my contract with GitHub was ending, so I was just like talking to my connections, and I started like looking 100% like, hey, with the little LinkedIn tag, I'm looking for open to work since September, and there are so many good companies out there that just don't open space for like talent all over the globe. Like, we have so many people in the world, right? But it's very frustrating for me when you apply for a job that you're perfect for that. And they say, hey, I should just hire in the US. And like when it's right away in the job description, that's okay. But the worst is like when you get an interview. And we don't interview the person say, oh, actually in Brazil. Oh, sorry, I'm not hired there. So that's my first piece of advice for everybody that's hired. And that's one thing that I see. I'm sorry, I have something in my head. But like I see that the hire manager, like the DevRel manager, doesn't understand how the company is hired. So they reach out to me, and then once they get to the HR person, they say they're not hired other states. So if you're hiring somebody, make sure to get a conversation with HR to be what they actually can do, so you don't bring anybody's hopes up. So that's my first point on this market thing.
I was like, to add one quick caveat there, I am, again, very fortunate to not, I live in the States. There's a tremendous amount of privilege that comes with that. But I actually had the similar thing happen with engineering degrees. I had 2 companies reject me because I don't have an engineering degree. It is very public on my profile and my resume that I do not have an engineering degree, and I have had 0 experience as a full-time engineer. And so, but I was rejected twice after the first interview. And these are sometimes calls that recruiters would reach out to me, and I'd be like, I would be like, yeah, I don't have an engineering degree. Is that a problem? But I've never had that question until this year.
Yeah, that's something I have been making clear now. Every time somebody tags me a position, I'm gonna ask that is that worldwide, like really, is really remote? Because that's something, it's my opinion, but I don't think that your job opening has a remote culture if it's like just one place, because the remote culture is something worldwide, right? So if you're gonna hire a person for the country, you're not gonna expose your company to more cultures. You're gonna have the same kind of people. Well, it's okay for other positions, right? Just make sure you make it clear and you know what you're wording, what you're putting out there.
I think it's very unfair to people looking for jobs, and you're not the only one, Pachi, that I know that happened to, where the hiring manager wanted to give somebody a job and had chosen a candidate and was very happy with them, but then turned out there was some policy issue, or they were only hiring in a certain country, and unfortunately the job doesn't work out. There are definitely companies that are very remote friendly. I think it's important to check beforehand. Obviously, if you're looking for a job, you have limited choice, but I think by definition, and I don't know, Erin, if you have any views on this, companies that are explicitly open to remote are probably better companies anyway.
I mean, personally, I would not work for a company that made me go into an office. So that's, I would also like, as someone who shares an office with my husband, he's like, and he goes in the office once a week, he openly is like, I get most of my deep work done when I'm not at home with you, because he's like, no offense, but you're kind of an annoying office mate. And I was like, No offense, I wouldn't want to work with like anybody else in an office either. So maybe like and that's something like I personally, like I am neurodiverse. I will not get, I can't, I like my home setup. I wouldn't get anything done if I had to go anywhere.
Yeah, like I have ADHD, and it's so great to be able to just like get up and go to the kitchen when I feel like I just go and snuggle my cat when I need a break, and I have lots of cats for that. So you know.
And the thing about developer relations is it is outbound work, right? A lot of your work is on social media,
Yes.
doing things like this, travel. So being in an office, I can't see how it's that important. And yet you have companies that are, you have to be in the office.
The new one I'm seeing, and I saw this a lot, was I had a company that they were like, we're remote. And then like I found out later they took down the job posting and reposted it remote with a preference on Pacific time standard. I was like, what? And I found out through back channels and various things that it's because they were running meetups in San Francisco and they wanted their DevRel to attend the meetups.
You should say that, right? Because like even if you're not in that time zone, you should like you can make you can make it at work like once a month, whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like making limitation that makes sense.
But here I'm like I have a spicier take on that. Maybe this is my spicy crotchety person take, is that how effective are those meetups actually to driving your DevRel goals in the first place? Because if your DevRel end all goals are user adoption or user awareness, how much are you actually driving? Or are you getting the person who's there for the free pizza and the free beer?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, here's a related question. Is the golden age of in-person meetups over? Pre-COVID, I used to run a whole bunch of meetups, and we'd regularly get 30, 40, 50 people in a room, right, on different topics. The numbers seem to be much lower nowadays, right? So I don't know. I'd be interested in your take, Pachi and Erin, what you think. Where are meetups going, right? Especially in person.
I can see from Brazil. I started getting tech right before the pandemic, so I didn't. I went to one meetup before the pandemic started, so I don't know exactly how it was the things before that. But here in Brazil this year, last year too, I feel like it's really getting back. At least in São Paulo, that's a big city. I know more than one community that have monthly meetups, but they do hybrid. So they have their YouTube channel and they do both. And I try to go as many as I can because it's fun. But I don't think it is as big as it used to be. By what I hear, like the people from before the pandemic saying, it should much more. But this year I haven't seen like a big growth in online things like meetups and conferences and that kind of events.
How would you find, are the meetups useful for job hunting? Have you got good job leads out of the meetups?
Sometimes I think I've gotten a lot of like other feedback, and I think like regarding meetups, I think they can work, but like we got lazy in the pandemic. Like I think remember the pandemic when we're like, everybody, we're gonna do a Zoom happy hour, and we were all like jazzed to do a Zoom happy hour. Now if you're like, Erin, we're gonna do a Zoom happy hour, I'd be like, well, I have laundry to do and like 16 other things that I actually have to do. Yeah. It's like, no. Like, do not invite me to your company happy hour. Like, give me a reason to go. I think we got lazy in gathering. And I think so that's why we saw a decline in meetups, is because people were like, oh, meetup, yay, we're actually gonna come. But like, how much work went into meetups? Like, I did audience engagement product before the pandemic a lot. So I still was running events and meetups, but I remember doing a lot of work to make a meetup successful. And I think people forget that that's work. But yeah, when it comes to finding jobs, I think it also, again, depends, because at a good meetup, the people that I want to talk to are there. But so I've gone to meetups sometimes and looked at everybody and been like, I don't care.
Yeah. The opportunity cost of turning up in person to a bad meetup is kind of high, right?
Yeah. I have a question. Erin, thanks. Great talk. The skills, your top 5 things that you would like to do and that you enjoy doing in your job. I find them very transferable to other sectors as well. And I touched on this briefly when we met, Pachi and Erin, and I'd like your view, and particularly you, Pachi, in Brazil. Is there a case to be made for DevRel people expanding their search to perhaps non-traditional tech companies or dev tool companies, and actually looking at maybe product or marketing roles, and where you, exactly as you had said, Erin, you have to make things explicit, and companies and people don't necessarily know what they need or want. And then where you see an opportunity or a brand or a company that you want to work with and you feel, actually, I can bring something, is that where, like, as your skills, they're so transferable. They can actually be used in so many teams and organizations. That's something to consider.
I think for me, it went down to, especially in this job search, I wanted, what do I want out of it? Yes, they're transferable, and but what do I want out of this role, and what am I going to be happy doing? And so for me, a lot of the experience, I like writing tutorials. I've been in a marketing role. I didn't really like it at times because I actually like building things. I like breaking into code and I like getting my hands dirty and stuff. And you don't get to do that much in marketing roles. So I think that's what it came down to. I actually did look heavily at going into product roles again, but I think being a product manager is somehow more competitive than a DevRel these days. I think that's the one place that has it harder if you're a product manager right now.
Yeah, I feel like myself in a kind of different way. I like coding, but that's not a passion, so I have been tending more to community focused things. I even have applied for some jobs that are not tech community managers, just community in some areas that I'm interested of. But it's different the way the other areas see community managers. Um, but I mean, I'm just looking at a bit of everything if it makes sense. Like Erin said, if it's something that I can make be happy doing that I really want to do. I'm really a big believer of the goal of the company, the goal of the job, something that makes sense. Of course,
Yeah.
you can always choose, but whatever you can choose is something like what they're building or they're working or who are going to be working to.
Yeah.
Like I had the luck to interview some great people, and I felt like I wanted a job, which was because of the people I know I were going to be working to. So a lot of rel. I love that. Like I said, I'm not super passionate about coding, but I'm passionate about working devs because that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. And I just met so many people that I feel like I don't know if I belong in other communities because I just feel like if I feel so good with these people. But I have been walking a little more away from technical roles and more like community and operational roles.
And that's really interesting. Sorry, Richard and Pachi, because it reminds me that that approach that you love developers is reminding me, Richard, of Christina Monti's podcast episode this week. She's senior technical product manager with PayPal, Pachi, and she says exactly what you say. She loves developers. She loves educating. She loves helping people do their work, and that's a product line, a product role. But yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Pachi. Thanks, Erin.
I was going to ask as well. I see a lot of people, even developers, complaining about companies having bad hiring processes. So people getting ghosted, no replies, or they make you do lots of work effectively for free, or lots of interviews and then nothing. What's your experience at the moment, Pachi? Is that still the case?
It really depends, especially DevRel usually don't have as many actionable things to do, but I can have a very recent example of a process that I don't know if I'm still on, but I was asked to study a paper and make a presentation on it and give the presentation. And it was actually something that was very exciting. I learned a lot. I had fun while doing that, but it was a lot of time and effort.
Yeah.
And I did the presentation 2 weeks ago, and after the presentation, they will be in contact soon. It has been 2 weeks and nobody. So, if you wanna ask that from the person, the minimum you can do is just give feedback as soon as possible. I understand people are busy, So like for me, usually I wait 1 week before I start freaking out, or get anxious, or maybe asking for a thing. But like if you're gonna have somebody work way more than that, like you're gonna be respectful, right? Because it's not we spend that time doing the thing, thinking about this company, how we're gonna work for that, and it's not Tinder for to be ghosting people. That's professional.
I think these companies forget that we'll all end up working somewhere, and we might be a customer, right?
Right?
So
Yes.
you should show respect, right?
Also, you can set your own timeline. I think that's what I did a lot of the times. Like I was like, I want to have an offer letter signed by this date. And again, that's a point of privilege for me to say that. And I was very fortunate to be in the conversation, but it did speed. I had one company that was like, we'll jump through hoops for you and we'll speed it up for you. And then I said, one company was like, our process takes this long. It's no quite like, we can't move it up, and sorry. So like, but we're not going to remove you from the process. We'll let you we'll let you see yourself out. But as far as like, I did have a few horror stories. I had one company ask for a technical exam. I did the technical exam. Then they changed the technical exam halfway through. And then they were like, can you redo it? And I was like, no. So I was like, I'm not redoing it. I already did it once. And like, this is stupid.
Yeah.
Wow.
But there's one company that I'm gonna mention, but it has been talked that the first step of the interview, they have around like 30 questions that I had to answer writing format. And I did that, and it took like a month for they to tell me that I didn't pass the next phase.
A month later.
Yes, after I spent like 2 hours running it was like 30 questions, and some questions were really you had to wasn't a sentence answer, it was something deeper. And so I'm saying like it's okay if you think that we are not the fit for the job, that's fine, that's not no. That's a match for everybody, but just have the respect to say, hey, answer in time on the manner, say that's not gonna work. Okay, no hard feelings.
I think a lot of companies undervalue people's public work as well, right? So all of the stuff that we publish on GitHub and the talks that
Right.
we've done and all that. I mean, go look at my portfolio, right? Because I've done all this. I don't need to do a task. I've done it already.
Right? Yes.
But I think that's devil's advocate here for the hiring manager is like they're getting like, I know for the role that I have now, they had over 200 applicants. Make it easy for them. Drop it, and like that's like having a for hire page. I had recruiters tell me straight up that was like the best thing because I gave them all my links. Like, go look at this. Do not look at my chaos repo that I was testing some idea way too late past my bedtime where it's gonna break. Like, here's the ones to go look at, or here's my work in public. And I think also on that flip side, and like again, I have mixed feelings putting the onus on the interviewee because of the intersection of privilege and privilege and like all the intersections that can come with that is like that's a very real thing. And people who have the privilege to say no to a job have a lot more affordances than someone who doesn't have the privilege to say no to a job, or someone who has a security blanket, or if you already are employed, you have a lot more rights and pushback on a company than someone who doesn't have that. But I do think we can do a better job of advocating for ourselves in that way, of being like, here's my timeline. I'm currently like, they're not going to call their other, like 9 times out of 10, they don't know if you're interviewing with 5 companies or 2 companies, or if you made up that company. But I tell people I'm in the process with other companies. You don't need to know when. Like, they are on a need to know basis. Big deal.
But I think as well, Erin, like that point, and it isn't even about the privilege of being able to say no either, because it's also an indication, regardless of your situation, if they're bad at a hiring process, what are they going to be like to work for? So actually, it is important information to take on board. You may actually be better off doing something else for somebody else on the way to where you want to go to, rather than maybe thinking that this organization, this particular role is for you, when if the hiring process is just horrendous.
Yes, and I feel like if it's the bad in the first step, I understand because like you have 1,000 applicants, but if like after you get the interview, you talk to somebody, they saw your face, they took the time to look at the resume, Then after that, it's bad, and you feel like you're bad treated. Then I don't want to work for that company. Again, I might still work for them. Like today, I had an interview. They offer me half of what I asked. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm considering that because I have been looking for a job for 6 months and I have a cute nephew to feed and 4 cats. So I'm still looking, but like if I by the end of this process they make me offer and I didn't find anything else, I'm gonna stop and they're gonna keep looking, and that's how job market is now.
Yeah.
But yes, but I feel like it's still the minimum I want is the company that make me feel like they appreciated it and taking the time to interview to talk to them.
Yeah. And like Erin's diverse experience, CV tells us, Pachi, any experience you can talk about any experience in any work, and leverage any network. So yeah, that's not bad.
I have used my experience as a nanny in several interviews. That's a great example of. I mean, like I know developers are like babies; they're hard to
Yes.
deal with sometimes.
That's
They have
100%.
tantrums, and I'm a pro at that. So no, just hire me. I know how to deal with tantrums. Yeah.
Honestly, Pachi might be more qualified than me sometimes. I just have a dramatic dog. So Pachi's actually more qualified to me than some.
I think myself and Sinead once we used to work in an organization many years ago. That the hiring practices were so bad that I don't know if this happened to you, Sinead. I had to do an interview after I started the job to complete their internal process.
Yeah.
Okay, that's new.
Oh, you have a job, but you haven't done the interview. You have to do the interview.
Yeah. I had a couple of interviews in front of different boards, and again to tick boxes for several parts of the organization, even though again, yeah, we had the job, but it was just, but this people now need to confirm that you have the job.
One thing I would say, and we're just coming up on the hour, so we'll finish up. I've been talking to a lot of people working in machine learning space and talking about the effect on software development, and will there even be jobs for software developers and developer advocates and all that sort of stuff in future. But there's something else that I see, and I'd be interested quickly to check in with you, Pachi, and Erin, whether you see this as well. Being in developer relations, I see a lot more developer tooling companies every day, lots and lots of them. And for me, I think that's a really good sign that machine learning will make our lives easier, but we need more and more developers all the time, right? Because there's more and more software. And if anybody has used ChatGPT, you know it's not quite good enough yet. But I think I don't know. I just want to check in with both of you. The fact that we're seeing lots more developer tooling companies, I think, is a good sign for the future.
I mean, I'm happy to say this. My last 3 paychecks have come from developer tooling companies. So actually, pretty much, I'm like doing all of my dev jobs have come from DevRel jobs have come from developer tooling companies. So I am biased. My last role was in machine learning, and I'm a very active volunteer at PyData and an MC, and I've spoken at 4 or 5 PyDatas now. And so, but I will say, like, the thing that's interesting about the machine learning world in particular, having taken a detour of that, is the DevRel jobs look different. And the DevRel jobs, and like this is also like Erin's spicy takes, the spicy Erin corner here, I'll fully admit, is 97% of people on the internet that are talking about ChatGPT actually don't understand it from a dev tools perspective. They understand it from a hype tweet perspective. They don't understand how the models work or what they do. Or if you start talking to them, getting down to those granular layers, they don't get it, or they're not seeing how it's used. And so I think if you're applying for a machine learning job, and I had a very cool experience where I was brand new to machine learning and they hired me because of the other skills I had. And they said, we want you to basically blog and learn about machine learning on the fly for us. So I was hired to create content from a beginner's perspective and got to learn about models and different Python packages and retraining and fine tuning some of these models. And it basically kind of blew my brain to this world. However, they are very weighed towards academia. So if you don't have a master's degree, they don't take you seriously. Most people coming there have a very, at least in my experience, and this is, again, one person's experience, I could be wrong, even going to some of these conferences, most people in these worlds have PhDs or have really deep technical backgrounds. Like, I was the only one who used VS Code of 5 of us. They were all over there in Vim and Emacs. And I'm like,
Well,
Yeah.
no. So very different though.
Interesting.
I agree.
I imagine it will get a bit less conceited, hopefully. I mean, I'm just blagging my way through LangChain at the moment. So
I mean, same. That's all. I'm just stumbling my way through everything. So
Yeah.
chaos. Yeah.
Pachi, do you have any final thoughts before we finish up?
Just like I believe that I feel like programming itself was something that was like that in the beginning. We need a degree, we need all those things, and then we evolved to a place that it got much better. There's still some companies that for some reason request a PhD in data or in programming, but that doesn't make sense. But most of companies have open desks for that, and I feel like this area like is a bit newer, so it have that. But I've been like a couple of years, it's gonna be a little more democratized. The beauty of technology, right, is there are so many people from so many places, so many backgrounds. So we are always evolving, and as long as we stick with the community side of things, with people first, we're going to be great. I hope so. That's me being very helpful for
I feel hopeful.
2024.
Okay, so thank you so much to our wonderful speakers tonight for making it happen. And
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Comments and questions, all that sort of stuff. Super insightful, super useful, and I hope it gets someone a job. So thanks again to Contentful for sponsoring. The next meetup is going to be on Wednesday, December 20th. Have your Christmas shopping done by then. 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. London, Dublin time. There is a festive plan. A regular audience member and former podcast guest, Johannes Dienst, will also be talking to us about metrics, and we'll get an idea of how his recently published framework is going on. And there's going to be an end-of-year quiz. So study up on your DevRel metrics and processes. We publish details in advance on devrelmeetup.com, and you can find all the previous talks there too, including the video from tonight once that is up. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Pachi. Thank you, Erin. Take care. Have a great evening. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Wonderful stuff. All righty. I'll say goodbye.
Bye.
Take care. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Later
Bye.
all.